Today to have Cathy Palm-Gessner and Bob Gessner speaking to us about monarch butterflies. Cathy Palm-Gessner is a former community college and high school teacher. She's a docent at the Heritage Park Zoological Sanctuary and has worked with the monarch butterflies in Illinois and Arizona. Bob Gessner is a Professor Emeritus at Western Illinois University. He is a master gardener and served on the board of directors for the NHI, the Highlands Center for Natural History, and the Prescott Native Plant Society. Both Cathy and Bob have served in the past as directors for Prescott Audubon and are research associates with the Southwest Monarch Study. Please welcome Cathy and Bob.
Well, thanks, Joe. And thank you, Prescott Audubon, for inviting us. Some of what we're going to talk about you probably have heard before, but we're also going to tell you about some new things that have taken place the last few months. Basically, we're going to talk about monarch biology, monarch populations, their current status, and what you might be able to do to help them. The monarch butterfly is a milkweed butterfly. Its larvae only feed on milkweed, so they need that to complete their life cycle. The adults nectar on many different flowers. They're medium to large butterfly with a wingspan about 3.5 to 4.5 inches. They are toxic. They obtain some chemicals from the milkweed that they feed on, and this makes them toxic to other organisms that might want to eat them. They have one of the largest migrations of any animals. They migrate something like 2,500 to 3,000 miles. One of the largest of insects after the painted ladies in Europe and Africa. The toxins eaten, as I mentioned, by monarch caterpillars also protect them, the adults, from predators. And this is a classic study that was done a long time ago, feeding a blue jay a monarch, and it vomits it out. There are some birds that can eat monarchs, but it's a small number.
We actually saw some greater roadrunners down in, it was Prescott Valley back in 2016. We were tagging monarchs. That was our big year. Quite a few were coming through. And those rascals, it was a family of 3, were jumping up and grabbing the monarchs and essentially eating them like potato chips. They were downing those babies down. And then the next day when I came, I saw the roadrunners, but they weren't doing that anymore. So.
Okay, monarchs are native to North and South America. They're also found breeding in the Pacific Islands. It's thought that they made their way there either with plants or via ships. They are found in Europe and Australasia. They are declining in Australia, at least the last reports. There's a couple of pictures here I'd like to mention. This one here I was able to take in the Galapagos Islands, kind of above a giant tortoise. The monarchs are mating there. It's thought that they were introduced there most likely on tropical milkweed plants, which are used in gardens and for flower arrangements. Last spring we were on Madeira Island, island that belongs to Portugal, and in one of the parks there we observed this adult monarch nectaring on flowers there.
Okay, this is, can you hear me without, okay. Yes, I taught school, so anyway, this is the life cycle of the monarch butterfly. If you note, it is a complete metamorphosis, mainly because the larva goes into the chrysalis. You can also call it the pupa. And then there's that incredible change in adult, then closes or comes out of that. Up here, you can see the female laying eggs on a milkweed. The curved abdomen gives that away. If you ever see a monarch doing something like that. And the eggs, of course, are really very tiny. So I would see one laying eggs, and then I go and look for them, and I can't find them. So anyways, how does the female know where to lay the eggs? They can find through chemoreceptors in their antenna at a distance. They can be brought into where milkweed is located. And then they also have hairs in their feet. I don't have a photo of that one. But they get on the leaf, and then they start literally drumming their feet on it to break the surface, the cuticle. And so it essentially tastes the plant, and then it knows it is milkweed. If they laid the eggs on something else, the larva would not feed. They would just starve. Let's see, the whole cycle takes about 30 days, but of course that varies with weather. And the adults, once they emerge, they can live anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. And again, a lot of variables come into play. And the females, once they lay their load of eggs, then they die. And these are the summer ones I'm talking about that are breeders. I'll be talking about the other ones, the migrators, in a little bit. Okay, now part of the larva or the caterpillars, it's kind of interesting. They're kind of like snakes. As the snake gets larger, it sheds its skin. The same with these little, here's one hatching out of the egg. This is called the first instar. And they start eating and eating, and as soon as they get bigger, these guys are about 2 millimeters, and then they go to the second stage or instar, keep on eating, and then they molt again. You see the molting here. And they do it a third time, fourth time, and then finally to the 5th instar. Let's see, as far as how fast they do this, they're called eating machines. About half of the body is the stomach. And yeah, so that food goes right through. And I found this this one particular quote saying that if a human baby grew at the same rate as a caterpillar, in a month it would be the size of a double-decker bus. So they're really eating machines. And next one. Okay, so once they get to the 5th instar, here, they usually get off the plants. They get away from the milkweed. And some people will ask, well, what happened to my caterpillars? They were there, and then the next day they're gone. And that's because they want to get off of the plants, away from all their feces, and then find a safer spot to go into the chrysalis. And to do this, I call it walkabout, but they have these salivary glands in their mouth that produces a liquid silk. And so it shoots out of their mouth, and it's like a walkway that they make, going back and forth. When the silk hits the air, it solidifies. So they can go anywhere. They can go on glass, whatever. Sometimes it can go like 20 feet away from plants. It's interesting. Okay, once they found the spot, they go into what we call the J curve. they're in this for about 8 hours, and during that time, the chrysalis forms. And then the skin splits, this is the last molt, splits, and you can see the chrysalis there. Now, in chrysalis, they can be in there maybe 12 days. 1 year, it was really cold, and it took them a long time, and they were 24 days in the chrysalis. I thought it wasn't going to happen, but it did. It was later in the season. And then right before they eclose or come out of the chrysalis, you can start seeing the actual features of the wings here. It's fascinating. And this is one that is going to slowly pump up the wings. Just kind of sit there and fly off. All right, let's talk about fall migration, triggers involved with this, like short day lengths, lower temperatures, and of course their milkweed and nectar sources are drying up or dying. And at that time then, what happens is that the chrysalises that are there at that time, when it ecloses, the adult comes out, they are not reproductive. Essentially, why they do this is that they don't want to have to, well, they're not going to mate. The males in particular are not going to chase the females around, or this one is showing males attacking each other. That behavior is eliminated with this sexual diapause, and then they take off on migration. Now, these, like I said, are sexually are not reproductive. These will live maybe 8 to 9 months. These guys during the summer, remember I think I said they'll live maybe 2 to 6 weeks as far as that goes. And then once they start migrating, they navigate by the sun angle and the Earth's magnetic field. Let's look at the map for fall migration. Once they have all those triggers and they're starting to head south, some of them went all the way up to Canada, but essentially the pathways are all going towards Texas. And even, now this map shows this coastline thing here, pathway. Actually, they also go along here too. Not all of them go to Florida. In fact, in Florida, the tip of Florida, these are non-migrators. There's populations that do not migrate at all. So they really like Florida. In the northern part here, some will overwinter and then fly north again. And so we've got them flying down Texas and then down to near Mexico City. I'll talk just a tad about the western here. We'll talk about this later on. But you can see some of the western ones do migrate to Mexico. And so the two populations can't mix there. And they will reproduce later on. So it's not like they're two separate, really separate populations. And of course, the majority of them are east of the Rockies here.
The bioreserves in Mexico are in central Mexico in the central volcanic area. Most of the reserves are in the state of Michoacan, but there are a few in the state of Mexico also. There is actually a state of Mexico in Mexico. The primary tree that they roost in the winter is a species of fir, Abies religiosa, and it is commonly referred to as oyamel or the sacred fir. It's thought that that sacred name comes from the cross formed by the branches. These trees are in the mountains almost 7,000 to over 13,000 feet. In the summer, they're in a high rainfall area, but the winters tend to be cool and excuse me, the summers tend to be cool and humid, and the winters tend to be dry. Only about 2% of the fir forest remains, so there's been a lot of habitat loss. And in this picture here, you see some open areas that are used for grazing or farming, and those are our problems. Also, cutting the forest for avocado orchards is a big thing now. Okay, in 2014, we were fortunate enough to be able to go down to these sites in Mexico with some monarch researchers. And at that time, the El Rosario Reserve had 50% or more of the monarchs. That has since changed. They believe with climate change, they have dispersed more, and they're not as concentrated as they were in the past. And also the numbers have gone down. Okay. This is the latest information on monarch populations in Mexico. We don't, whoops, oh, I may need your help. Actually, Cathy's supposed to do this one, so I'll defer to her.
Yeah, actually, we can't go back to the last slide.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see how thick and how difficult it would be to count individual butterflies, like they do in California. So, next. So, they count by hectare. And this is a bar graph made by Monarch Watch. And it's starting in 94 and 95, the summer of 94 going into the winter of 95. And you can see a kind of a trend here. The lowest year so far has been around 2013, 2014. Now, last year, there's essentially 59% less monarchs from this year here. And then on top of this, and they think one of the major causes is extreme weather events. In particular, they had a very hot weather drought in October and November in the southeast. And that's where most of the monarchs go down to Mexico. And this was causing a lot of monarchs to die before they could get down to Mexico to their overwintering sites. And then on top of this, they predict, the data is not actually posted yet, they haven't made the new graph yet. But now they are saying that this last summer, winter, is going to be the lowest population in Mexico at about 0.5 hectares. So even lower than that. Again, for 24, summer 24 to 25, there was a lot of heat and drought, extreme heat and drought and habitat loss. That's what they think is happening for this count to be so low.
Okay. They delay putting out the numbers during the tourist season, because if the numbers are low, they may lose tourists. So they're not going to give the numbers for a while yet, the official numbers.
All right, let's look at spring migration, and what happens that the monarchs will start leaving the overwintering sites. They actually become reproductive, and they breed at this time. and they're about 8 to 9 months old, the ones that have overwintered there. They'll leave around February, March, but it's kind of all over the place nowadays as far as when they come and go because of changes in climate. At this time, they have bred and they're moving north, and these older monarchs now are laying eggs. They lay the eggs and die. And these eggs then, it could be northern Mexico or in Texas. They lay on the milkweed there, and that's going to be what we call the first generation heading north. Okay? And they can go through several generations. As they head north, they lay eggs and die, and then those eggs hatch and go further north. We can get up to maybe 5 generations, some going all the way up to Canada. I know that this last spring they were talking about the first group of monarchs heading north. They got to Texas. They had really cold weather, no milkweed. So that's probably where some loss occurred at that time. Luckily, not all of them were going at the same time. So you can see the effects of climate on these animals. And right here we have the corn belt, and that they have that dashed around there showing that a lot of monarchs come from that area. It's a very important area. Unfortunately, that is the corn area and soybean. Very excellent soil, very good for agriculture. And then some will go all the way up to Canada. I don't think you can read this. The limiting factor for how far they go north is the limit of milkweed. So that's the limit of how far north milkweed will grow. Over here in the west, I already mentioned that some during the fall do go down to the wintering sites. They don't know, we don't tag in spring because not enough people, and they're coming out of Mexico. So a lot of unknowns there, but you can see that in Arizona they can go down to Mexico or to the west coast. And then, let's see, the next slide there. Okay, so in the spring then, we get monarchs that then go to the west coast of California. And it's very close to the water, so it's nice and cool and humid, very similar to down in Mexico. And the majority of the monarchs, it is a smaller population, definitely, than what goes to Mexico. Now this is a normal, most years in the past, monarchs would arrive in October from like Arizona and other states north of here and so on. And they then stay on the eucalyptus, Monterey cypress, and pine. And it's kind of interesting, we have an introduced tree, the eucalyptus, but at that time it blooms. And so it's a nice nectar source for the monarchs, especially before they head out around March. And then you have the first generation, or the very, the older monarchs are now breeding and laying eggs as they head out to the east and north. And then they die, and then that generation goes further. Oregon, Washington, now they have sightings in Canada, above Washington, like out east, Nevada, Arizona. And then you get into the fall, all the triggers kick in, and then you have the monarchs that do not reproduce return to the California coast.
Okay, 2016 was our second largest sighting of adults in the Prescott area. And since there were so many here, we were able to tag something like 137 different ones. And 4 of them made it to California. There are spotters there with spotting scopes and I guess good eyesight to read the little numbers and letters. But one of the ones we tagged in Prescott Valley, in a drainage area, made it all the way to Tacoma, California. And we tagged it on October 16th, and it was seen there on December 21st. And it traveled 463 miles, which, you know, is amazing for a little creature like that. Okay, the normal way they are tagged is with a unique set of numbers and letters on this mitten-shaped section of the wing called the discal area. And that's been traditionally done for many years. In Mexico, Cathy didn't mention, but after the season is over, the locals look for dead monarchs on the ground that have tags on them. And they get paid a small amount of money for the ones they turn in. In California, of course, they're observing them directly with spotting scopes. But the researchers have wondered for some time, how do we trace their patterns? Because, you know, the current system, you know, has some problems. So they've developed some radio tags that they are attaching to the upper or lower sides of them. And this is only one here, and it's cut off this piece of plastic, and it has a solar panel on it, small solar panel. And they're just experimenting with this now, but Southwest Monarch has, I think they've tagged about 30 or more of these, and they're testing out. And I think they've gotten some interesting results as far as how they, the patterns that they take in their flights. Okay, these are the most recent California results for monarchs. And in California, they're like birders. You know, they look directly for each individual. In Mexico, there are too many, so they use hectares or areas to report numbers. But there have been some low years in California. They've come up a little bit the next 3 years, but from the numbers that are being reported now, and the latest ones will be out shortly, they do 3 different sightings, 3 different times. And usually it doesn't change much towards the end. So they're predicting that there'll be about 9,000 to 10,000, which, you know, is way down here. So outside of this possible anomaly year, it is probably the lowest year on record in California, and also the lowest year on record in Mexico. So it's unusual to have both places having very low counts. Some reasons that have been suggested, there was a heat dome over the southwest, and the lack of monsoon rains caused the milkweed to die off, and the caterpillars likewise. But the important thing about this slide, I guess, is that the numbers are going to be way down here again. These are our sightings in Prescott, Arizona over 11 years, and there are a lot of, you know, possible inaccuracies in this, so these are probably not absolute numbers by any means, but Cathy and I and Christine and David Moll and other spotters, you know, have been looking, and we think the trends are realistic from, the numbers are realistic from what we've observed. And basically the last 6 years in Prescott, the numbers have been quite low. And it doesn't always correlate directly with California, as you can see here. What's that? Yeah. Probably. These two here were very wet monsoons, and they still didn't recover, even having, you know, wet monsoons. And some of that may relate to fewer migrated from California, but also, temperature and moisture and, other factors are probably involved.
This is a chart showing our raw data. In 2014, Bob and I became research associates with Southwest Monarch Study, and we were trained to observe and then also tag monarchs. And on top of that, also we had volunteers that we recruited. Thank you very much, Chris. She has stayed with us from the very beginning. And anyone else that's sent us data here? Anyway, so you could see the trend. And I know the last 2 years here, I did not have any caterpillars at all on all my milkweeds. And, but anyway, so this is raw data from volunteers and from us also. I guess I also said that we record what plants they are on when they are seed. And then, oh, Alice, you work at the Veterans Greenhouse, right? And then we have someone there, Phyllis, you tell Phyllis, and then she tells me, they always they planted a milkweed garden there, and you had a couple? 2, yeah. So, quite drastic changes here. What is going on? Well, we already mentioned the heat dome across the Southwest. And I think that, in the next slide there. Okay, so I thought, all right, I'm going to check out Prescott temperatures for this summer. I don't know if any of you remember, it was kind of hot. And in fact, not seeing any monarchs. I didn't see much in any other butterflies either. And okay, July is usually when they come in. I always think of the rodeo. We get rain and stuff at that time. And look at these temperatures. They're way up above 100 all across here. I know June I always think is very hot, yeah. But July, way up. August, and then September. October is getting into the 90s. So it's quite obvious what's going on as far as one variable affecting these animals. And I kind of look at the monarch as a canary in the coal mine. A lot of research is done with the monarch, so we know what's going on with the numbers. And obviously everything is connected, so it's going to be affecting other animals, other insects. And I think the next one, okay, the deer queen, this is also a milkweed butterfly. It needs milkweed also. And there was a really strange incident that happened this summer to show, or actually it was winter. November, that other animals are being affected. And because of the temperatures, by the way, if it's up to 95, they don't come into the area, monarchs, so on. And if there are larvae there already, chrysalises, they can die at the high temperatures. And in this case, it seems like the queens also had delayed egg laying because in November, Bob was out on our front deck, and it's south exposure, and he found a queen caterpillar walking along. And we started checking. We found 14 caterpillars of the queens on both our Arizona and the horsetail milkweed. And they definitely would not make it because they still had to go into chrysalis and all that. Well, luckily, we were going to go down to see the director of Southwest Monarch Study, and she has a yard full of milkweed. And so luckily, we were able to pass them on to her. But this is showing the extreme temperatures and stuff like that. It's just, throwing things off here as far as labeling.
Okay. Some monarchs, a small number, remain in Arizona for the winter. You can see them in the lower deserts, Phoenix, Salt River area. Desert Botanical Garden reports them. You see them in Tucson. We've seen them at Reed Park in Tucson and other locations. And also Yuma and along the Colorado River in Parker and Lake Havasu. These in the desert are primarily on rush milkweed. It's sometimes called desert milkweed, but I guess the official common name is rush milkweed, Asclepias subulata. This particular milkweed is adapted for the desert. Pretty much it just looks like sticks of euphorbia or something of that sort. And it drops its leaves as the temperatures get warmer, so it's well adapted for the hot desert climate. And adults can nectar on it as well as caterpillars feeding on it.
Okay, we've already mentioned some things with extreme weather as far as some of these lower numbers. And of course, loss of habitat as far here, they're mowing along the roads, and that's taking out nectar and the milkweed plants. I know, like in Illinois, they're trying to not do that along some of the major freeways. Herbicides, insecticides, the herbicides are killing off the milkweed, and then you get your insecticides killing off the larvae. And climate and weather extremes, which I was mentioning, and of course all of that is linked to our use of fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels. Unfortunately, Palisades, 4 days ago I found out that the second largest colony in LA County was burned, and of course the monarchs were still there. So that was lost there. And then some deforestation in New Mexico for other farming things.
Okay, something fairly recent, the Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has determined that monarch butterflies are threatened. Although they've said this 10 years ago, but they said there were more important species to list, so they didn't list the monarch at that time. But it's for real this time, and basically they're saying in their report that the monarchs are likely to become endangered in the foreseeable future, and they propose to be listed as threatened. And they have a public comment period until March 12th of 2025, where the public can comment on what they think about listing the monarch. And you can go to their website, and we can put this up later if anyone is interested in looking at it again.
Okay, what would happen if they are listed as threatened? Essentially, they would prohibit the touching and caging of monarchs or trying to raise them in captivity, and farms, butterfly farms. And I was called into a classroom several years ago. The teacher had ordered all these caterpillars, monarch caterpillars, for the kids to watch, and about 95% of them died. And then a few of them did make it to the adult stage. Some came out looking like this. That is because they were infected with a protozoan. It's called OE. Here's some of the spores. If you look at the abdomen underneath the scope, you can actually see them or do the tape test. And so that was very sad. And then also you can buy monarchs to release for special occasions. But this breeding in close contact in these farms is going to spread this OE, and if they're released, that's not good. Now, as far as possessing a monarch, we do net them for monitoring. California has the strongest laws right now. You cannot possess monarchs. But Southwest Monarch Study is still tagging there. You get a permit from the government to be able to keep on doing the research, which is more and more important as far as that goes. We included this one. There's as far as homeowners using sprays that are very toxic. One time, this greenhouse had a whole bunch of monarch caterpillars that were eating all the milkweed there, and they asked me to take several of us to take them because we had milkweed. And when you get like 40 caterpillars, you need a lot of milkweed. And so I was asking people, do you have milkweed? A couple said, yeah. So I took the milkweed. The next morning, the caterpillars were throwing up and dying on the bottom of the cake. And so unfortunately, I had to go back to them and say, have you sprayed anything? Yeah, they had been spraying the roses. The roses were around the corner. And still, the spray, which is so toxic, just a little bit on the milkweed would cause them to die. And as far as areas being designated as critical habitat, that could be a part of it. I like to think about incentives, maybe for planting milkweed and nectar plants.
Okay, what can you do to help? We recommend, I'm going to use this help again. Too many buttons. Thanks. We recommend planting a pollinator garden. There have been recent studies that show that people's gardens are a major habitat for insects in urban areas, particularly watered landscapes. I mean, that's a bad thing to say in Prescott because we're trying to conserve water, but these watered landscapes do make a big difference. And of course now they're also recommending watered landscapes to prevent forest fires. So our thinking on water may have to change a little bit. These provide conservation areas for a whole bunch of insects and other animals besides butterflies. The plants themselves, they support the breeding and help with migration, and pollination increases, and with more pollination there are more seeds for birds and other animals that are seed eaters. And of course, the great increase in biodiversity, bringing in various bugs and beetles and bees and frogs that eat them, and other kinds of bees and birds and so forth are all positive things. And if you have a garden, you will notice a lot of different things that you would miss otherwise. Okay, in our area we have several different species of milkweeds. This one here, antelope horns, is one of the most beautiful flowers, I think, of the milkweeds. But one of the problems with it is that it flowers early in the year, before the monarchs get here. So monarchs like plants in fresh conditions, so we do know that they go to the spider antelope horn milkweed, but at least at our elevation, they bloom too early. Same true for butterfly weed, which is commonly planted in gardens. It blooms in our yard in May, and the monarchs are not here until July for the most part. On the other hand, our most abundant local milkweed, horsetail milkweed, is the best as far as producing caterpillars in our area. It's rhizomatous. You find it in roadsides and fields and vacant lots and drainages, and it's really the one that does the most for caterpillars.
Okay, Arizona milkweed, some of you may have noticed that I do have seeds out here that are free for the Arizona, but the map there shows that it grows further south. But now essentially, because of the changes in the weather climate, we're at 5,700 feet and it overwinters in our yards. So far, we'll see what's happening this year. But it's very easy to grow. You don't have to cold stratify the seeds. And that's why I picked this one, the seeds, for people. It's lovely in the garden. It blooms all summer into the fall. So one, it's good for the larva, and two, it's good for the migrating monarchs.
Probably best kept as a garden plant, not in natural areas.
And then tropical milkweed, maybe some of you heard about this controversy in Florida, California, some places in Texas, they don't want people to grow. In Arizona, in Prescott, some of the greenhouses do sell it. It is an annual, and it's not a concern because it's too dry here for it to survive. And that's why I'm mentioning it, because you can get it locally. But again, it's not going to, it's an annual.
Okay. There are a lot of animals that will eat milkweed when we have dry conditions. They're looking for fleshy food sources, and we've had pocket gophers and rabbits and pack rats and deer eating milkweed. So usually the first year we protect the plants just to get them established, and usually in later years, even if the animals chew them off, they come back. As far as preferred plants in the Prescott area, from the numbers we've gotten over the years, these milkweeds here, horsetail, Arizona tropical, usually have the highest numbers. And of these, of course, horsetail is the only one native to our area. As far as flowers for nectar, annual sunflowers and rabbit brush are native, depending on the location. But Mexican sunflower and butterfly bush are really loved by monarchs, and they go to frost.
Yeah, all butterflies, a lot of insects, go to these plants too. And then these, we have the rabbit brush. They go to frost, and so it's very important for the nectar for the migrators. This is Mexican sunflower, or Tithonia. That goes to frost. Unfortunately, our annual native sunflower usually doesn't go to frost. Although this year, I think it was put off by the heat, and I didn't see it. It was still blooming like in October, which was very unusual. But also, then I have the Arizona milkweed, and I do have seeds then, also of the Mexican sunflower. Very easy to grow. We decided to include this too. Some butterflies do what is called mud puddling. They don't sip water directly from like bird bath, but they go to areas where it's muddy, and then they can take the water from those areas. And since our summers have been so dry, who knows? Maybe you'll get them coming into your yard. It's a very easy setup. A saucer, you put in decomposed granite, which we have gobs of, garden soil, but you can just do that. Throw in a little compost, because butterflies are attracted to feces. of rotting things, and then you wet the whole thing down. But you don't want an actual pool of water. You put rocks in there so they can sit on it. Don't do the mud flood. Was taken down, and they were getting water. So that's a possibility to try. As far as what else we have, I brought brochures from Southwest Monarch Study. This one has the website on it up there. You get on that. You can then also go to the Facebook, and that has updates about what's going on with the monarchs in the West. And let's see, I already told you I've got the 3 seeds of the Arizona and the Mexican sunflower. So that's it. We're done. And thank you so much for listening. Any questions?
I get the impression that the monarchs that migrate to the north, say Canada, Illinois, whatever, they reproduce and then they die. How do the remaining, the next generation of monarchs know where to migrate the next winter? I mean, how do they know where they're going?
Well, they do. It's supposedly, probably like birds. The sun and then the magnetic field, the Earth's magnetic field. But there's probably a lot more out there that we don't know.
On the graph with the hectares, I forget what year it was, but there was one year a while back that was much higher than all the others. What happened after? I don't know, it was like 2006. There was one where it was really high.
In Prescott?
It was in Mexico.
Oh, Mexico.
Hectare graph.
Yeah. Don't know.
Oh, I was going to say Bob would answer that one.
Well, there are some things they have to negotiate getting to Mexico. Some years there are storms over the so-called
She's
Gulf of
talking,
America.
Let's see, this is way back. The highest point there.
Yeah.
And what you'd have to do is probably go to that year, look up monarch pounds for that year, and then by now you would think that they kind of know what's going on.
They've also lost a lot of habitat since then. So
Yeah,
could be.
a lot of habitat
Like,
down there.
just like really great conditions.
Right, if you have thinning of the trees, the temperature changes, and that can throw off the monarchs. It may be too cold for them to survive. You have more deaths during the winter.
We think things are going the opposite now, though. With higher temperatures, they're moving up to higher elevations, and they're considering planting trees in Mexico, but, we'll see.
Good question.
When do we start on seeds? When do we start that process of the seeds?
Well, Arizona, I would do the milkweed. I do starting in, who are the growers here? Probably February or March.
You could start any time, really.
Yeah, so that they're bigger. They'll make it if they're bigger, and I have that in
I
there.
had really good success last year because we did the olive class, so I got the seeds.
Yeah, I've got all.
In trays, put them on the heat lamp, and it was wonderful. They were
Great.
Yeah,
Nice.
the leftover seeds we grew ourselves and gave the plants to the Highlands Center.
Yeah. So I hope that
February, March.
Yeah, for the Arizona, get that going pretty, because they'll bloom once they are out in the garden, which is very nice. The sunflower, the Mexican sunflower, I'm not really worried about getting it going right away because what I'm worried about is having it blooming at the end of the summer. But it will start blooming. It depends when you get it in the garden, and make sure you deadhead it.
Can you describe the relative importance and the relative interest in the monarch of other butterflies?
Well,
Well, I think it's because they're very long migration, which fascinates people. I think that's probably the number one
what's the enchantment of humans with this particular animal? Ecologically, it may not be super important, or, but you know, bees are much better pollinators and so forth. I mean, they have a role, don't get me wrong there. But, you know, it's an animal that kids study in school and, you know, we see in our gardens, and it's enchanted us. And yeah.
Do queens migrate?
Okay, I think they, some do go down Baja, Mexico. But yes, they do go south.
And they go as far south as they need to, in either southern Arizona or northern Mexico.
A lot of unknowns there because a lot of research has been done on monarchs where there are a lot of unknowns, but very little with the queen.
Yeah.
So last fall, we saw monarch butterfly, which the first time ever. You know, that was great. Is there something we should do with these things on?
You can, our cards are over here in the brown bowl there. If you could just email us.
Okay.
What do you need to know?
The day, what it was on,
Okay.
feeding nectarine, and yeah.
And date, yeah.
Yeah, the date.
We send it down to Southwest Monarch Study, and they kind of compile all the data.
Yeah, if anyone wants to do that to help out more as far as spotting, we have, our cards are there with our email on it. So, and if you have questions about the seeds and stuff. Okay, well, thank you again.
Thanks for listening.